Welcome to Republican Roundtable. I'm your host, Max Reimer. As the election season heats up for the 2022 election, one of the races at the top of the ticket or near the top of the ticket to pay attention to is the Attorney General's race. In Minnesota currently, we have Keith Ellison, and running against Keith Ellison, well, running in a primary first and running against Keith Ellison eventually, Dennis Smith. Dennis, thank you for joining the Republican Roundtable.
Great to be here.
So you're running for Attorney General. Why? What possessed you to do such a thing?
Seems, it can seem a little crazy at times. I get that. And running is really difficult, for sure. And we've been going all out since June 1st. We've been in 78 counties. And it's affirming what I've heard before we started is that Minnesota, where it's not on the right track. We've lost trust in our institutions, the media, in our government, our judicial system, and even some with each other. And I'm uniquely qualified to help restore that trust using the Attorney General's office.
Let's talk about your background a little bit. You're a former legislator, obviously. I think that's where most people probably recognize the name from. But Dennis, tell us about what's brought you up to this position to run for this office.
So every chapter of my life has prepared me to be Attorney General. I grew up in White Bear Lake. My father was a milkman. He raised me by himself. And if I wasn't in school, I was on the milk truck with him. And you remember the milkman? Yeah. So I was the little boy in the milk truck. I'd run the milk up to the door, sometimes put in this cute little milk boxes decorated with such care and love, often in the clients' and their customers' refrigerator. My father had keys to over 500 of his homes. I mean, imagine a service person in today's world having keys to 500 homes.
Yeah.
So
I can't imagine that.
Yeah, I mean,
it's different era.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's where I first learned how to build trust with people. Later on in my youth, I got involved in the bicycle motocross sport, BMX.
Okay.
It's in the Olympics now, so it's widely known. But it turns out I was good, pretty good. I was ranked in the world top 10 twice, and I won national championships.
Wow.
So I learned how to develop my competitive edge. I went to college at North Dakota State University in Fargo. Go Bison.
Yeah.
Pretty good football season.
A decent football team.
Decent.
I've heard about them a couple times.
Yeah. 9 out of 10 national championships. Not that we keep track.
Yes.
Yes. I worked for a while, then I went to law school at night at William Mitchell College of Law. I went to night school, worked my way through law school. After I graduated, I opened up my own practice. And for 22 years, I've been helping clients and businesses and individuals, helping them plan for the future, helping them in their moments of crisis. The only advertising I've ever done is the back of my church bulletin. I got the upper left-hand square, great double square. I've never given that up.
Yeah.
So I've got 2 great kids, Lillian and Buck, and we're a hockey family. I play hockey. I played hockey my whole life. If my dad was here tonight and you gave him a mic, he would tell you that I learned how to skate before I learned how to walk. And, who knows if that's true or not, but it's a good Minnesota story. Yeah, so I taught my kids how to play hockey, coached them for 16 years, and I became president and re-elected president as the Osseo Maple Grove Hockey Association. And those suburban hockey parents, that's tough business.
Yeah.
And it's a common...
Primed you for politics, right?
Exactly. It's a joke that it's more difficult to be the association president than to be a legislator in St. Paul, making laws for all of us to live under. And I got to find out if that was true.
Yeah.
In November of 2014, I became a legislator. I won my election, and I went to the Capitol, and I fought like heck for what we believe in. 100% voting record with MCCL, fighting for those that can't speak for themselves. 100% voting record with Minnesota Gun Owner Caucus, fighting for our Second Amendment. I chief authored the largest business tax cut in the history of the state of Minnesota. I was a bridge builder. I passed significant legislation that I chief authored, and all of them signed by Governor Dayton. I learned how to work with people and pull people together. And now we're faced with this opportunity where we have an attorney general who is not representing all of Minnesota. And the race is that important, so I had to get in it.
Speaking of Keith Ellison, our current Attorney General, he won obviously in 2018. I think that was shocking for a lot of us who just saw him as this extremely radical figure. Dennis, as you actually look at Keith Ellison's time in office, what would you point to as some of, do you feel like he governed in the same radical way he kind of campaigned on or was a congressman on, or do you feel like he's maybe earned the trust of Minnesota a little bit more? I mean, what weaknesses are you seeing in him?
Yeah, I don't think that he's governed as the way that he campaigned. I think his congressional record represents more of how he is as the Attorney General, where he wants to defund the police. I mean, he literally doesn't want want any police. He's on the record trying to help destroy the Minneapolis Police Department on the heels of having riots and having our city burned down. He doesn't want to prosecute people fairly. He plays politics with every decision. And he's done nothing with human trafficking. Human trafficking, labor trafficking is an enormous problem. A couple of weeks ago, I launched a task force to identify and to talk about this problem and to gather information and create solutions, because our Attorney General has had 3 years and he's done nothing in this area. We're 4th highest in human trafficking in the entire country. That is unacceptable.
What has he spent his time doing?
Well, he likes to defund the police, and he likes to go after Republicans, business owners. He likes to make sure that the big box retailers can keep their stores open during COVID, yet the mainstream stores have to close. He's been spending a lot of time doing that. And Minnesotans are not being treated fairly, and they've had it. I've heard this in the 78 counties I've been to since June. I hear this no matter where I go, that they want the laws to be applied fairly. That is simply not happening now.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. He seems to have a very political motivation to everything that he does. And I really felt like during the COVID pandemic was when that got exposed the most. You know, I think Keith Ellison really operated as the heavy hand of bad policy.
Right. And we saw during the height of COVID the importance of the executive committee. The 5 people that, it's a sleepy committee that people really never paid attention to prior to COVID. But it's the governor and the lieutenant governor and the AG and the secretary of state and the auditor. And they set the rules. When the legislature was ineffective, you know, when they were not able to pass any laws, that committee governed our state. And we need to have diversity in that group. It's been 25 times our Republicans have lost statewide. 25 times in a row. And it's been 56 years, we know, since we've had a Republican Attorney General. The time is now. The state is recognizing that we need diversity in that office, and we need to have someone that represents everybody. And we will do that after this election this November.
And the number of times we've lost elections, I think that's something that a lot of the statewide candidates are kind of bringing up, Dennis. I'm curious about 2 things. You know, one, why do you think it's been so long for the Attorney General specifically, since we've elected a Republican? And then 2, Dennis, like, what are you going to bring to the table in the general election that, you know, will make you different than, you know, generic R, if you will?
Yeah, I don't think we've won the Attorney General office since 1966 because we haven't had a candidate that has appealed to the entire state. And that's where the Dennis Smith campaign comes in, where I can appeal to greater Minnesota, all the great places throughout our entire state. I can appeal to the suburbs, the true battleground for this upcoming election, and also St. Paul and Minneapolis. So we really have 3 separate races going on within our state. And I'm the only candidate that can appeal to all 3, that can blend it all together.
Talking about the suburbs, you're right. I think that most Republicans are realizing that, hey, we kind of lost suburban strongholds that we had for a long, long time. I think you were part of one of those in Maple Grove. Is that a constituency you think we can get back, or does the path look different?
The right candidate can get it back. I think if we have a candidate that can listen, that can appeal to reason, and show that they are respecting their voice, I think we can. I've done that. When I was in the Minnesota House of Representatives, I represented Maple Grove, typical suburban district. But it was purple, so purple that Hillary Clinton carried that district in 2016. She beat Donald Trump by 6 points. Now, I beat Hillary Clinton by 10. So that means I had people vote for me that didn't agree with me on every issue. Establishing that kind of trust with the suburban voters to say, I know I don't agree with them on this issue, on that issue, but we need someone like that can transcend the political boundaries, the political name, and have the confidence they're going to represent all of Minnesota, including the suburbs.
Let's talk a little bit about the issues you brought up. I just found it interesting. Human trafficking and labor trafficking as an issue. And I think that sometimes, I know Eric Paulson in Congress, he was very, he was on the forefront of some human trafficking legislation. What kind of led you to that, that issue? And By the way, what is labor trafficking?
Yeah, so what led me to the issue is talking to Minnesotans and realizing, listening about what the problems are. Something Keith Ellison is not doing. I've gone to places in the state where no statewide candidate have gone before. And I sit down, and I don't care what your political affiliation is, because at the end of the day, I'm going to be the attorney for the entire state. So I want to know, what are you concerned about? And the issue has come up. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized that our state is positioned well for human trafficking. We have the large lakes, all the boundary waters to the north. International boundary waters come into play there, on Lake Superior as well. All of our beautiful lakes are used against us in the sense in the winter with all the different ice houses. And then we have the pipeline traffic, all the oil traffic from North Dakota. So that is has created this situation where Minnesota is a great place to have so many abductions, so many people taken against their will, and it's something that has to stop. It's the worst crime against humanity.
And the crime itself then is people being abducted and then used for forced labor. Is that what?
Exactly,
is that what it
right.
is?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. That's the other component of it. And it's 60% women, 40% men. So it impacts everyone in our culture. Every once in a while, you hear about a case where a Native American is that they have, someone went missing, and it doesn't get the attention that it should. And we're going to bring a spotlight to this issue. We're going to solve this issue when I'm Attorney General come November of this year.
And then the other issue, specifically with law enforcement, criminal justice, that component of the job of Attorney General. What do you bring? What do you bring to that office? What's a day one kind of initiative, Dennis, that you're going to take on from the Attorney General's seat?
It's changing the tone and the tenor of the conversation. As I've traveled the state, I meet with police officers of all stripes, and I listen about what their concerns are, what is going right, what isn't going well. The list is kind of long about what's not going well, and we see this manifest itself every single day in the newspapers and on the news accounts, where there's carjackings by the hour. Not just in Minneapolis anymore. It's in all the suburbs. It's the grocery store, as you're coming out of your car on a Saturday afternoon, and you might not make it back to your car.
And it doesn't really matter these days where you live even.
Exactly. Yeah, because the criminals have gotten smarter, and they've gone to where there's easier access. The reason they've done that is because our Attorney General is doing nothing about it. He's made it where carjacking is a slap on the wrist. And that is just unacceptable. When we don't have that type of safety, that's the beginning of the end for our society. That will change when I'm Attorney General.
Yeah, it's fascinating, because I think when people think about the Attorney General's office, we're not talking about a legislative branch. We're talking about really the chief law enforcer in the state of Minnesota. Am I wrong in my assessment of that?
No, you're right. Yes, it's making sure that all the laws are followed in Minnesota.
So when we talk about the prescription of the law and doing it based on politics, Dennis, because there's a whole bureaucracy underneath the Attorney General as well. And I worry about that bureaucracy. I worry about the entrenchment, the political ideology that's been baked into an office for 56 years or 60 years. How do you, on day one, when you're looking at a situation like that, what do you do when you might have a whole office that's working against you? I mean, do you fire everyone? I don't. What do you do, Dennis?
Well, the whole reason the office will be against you is for 56 years, we haven't been able to win. So yes, all those people, some of them have been there for a long time, but the institutional knowledge is something that needs to transcend politics. So it's a mistake to say you're going to fire everyone. That's a horrible mistake. My goal when I'm Attorney General is to have the best office that represents Minnesotans, all Minnesotans. And your political affiliation aside, I don't care about that. I care, are you being the best attorney you can be? And is the state giving you the resources to grow and develop as an attorney so we can continue to nourish the attorneys in that office? We need to have the model of like a large corporation or a large law firm. So someone that comes to the firm in a variety of different capacities and skill level, that they receive the type of training, the type of professional guidance that they need in order to be the best attorney. And I don't think that's happening right now. I think there's a lot of political, lot of spotlights in that regard. And that's not going to be tolerated. If you are not following what the direction of the Attorney General is doing, what I'm saying, and if you're not being the best attorney you can be, then you're going to have an opportunity to find other employment. But the institutional knowledge of a lot of people that have been there, there's a lot of great people in that office. I've met a lot of them. There's a lot of great people. And we need to have that office represent how our state is. We have a divided state.
Yes.
We have a House of Representatives that says a 4-seat margin out of 134.
Right.
We have a Senate that has a one-seat margin, and after a couple Democrats peeled off, we've got 1 or 2 more votes, maybe, very close.
Yeah.
And then we have our congressional seats. They're split. We have 4 on each side. And the governor's race hasn't been competitive in 16 years since we've won, but we have a tradition of going back and forth on that, and some of the other constitutional offices. So the Attorney General's office, when I'm the Attorney General, will represent all of Minnesota.
And piggybacking on that thought, we are a split state. I think people forget about that. I think people want you to run blood red until you need to pick up some independent votes, and then all of a sudden we're just going to magically win something. And it leads to this idea, and you brought it up earlier on, Dennis, the losing trust in institutions. And you brought up government, you brought up big tech. I'm very curious about, from that bully pulpit, what do you do about big tech? You know, I mean, that's one of the issues that we talked about before we were on camera here. What do you do from that seat?
Well, and in regard to the trust and having people know that you're going to do a good job, my campaign, we've received over 25 endorsements of my colleagues in the Minnesota House and Minnesota Senate. And some of the most conservative members in our legislature and some of the not very conservative. And that really does represent how our state is. And the fact that I have that breadth of support shows that they know that I can work with all those different groups. And we have complex problems in our state, no doubt. And one of them is big tech. But we need to force big tech. The EU has had some better models than our country has about forcing the technology companies to provide, to make some decisions and to be more forthcoming and to be more transparent. I'm running the most transparent campaign in the history of the state of Minnesota, I feel. And we need the technology companies to share in that transparency. That's a way to bring about more fairness on those platforms.
Talking about kind of campaign strategy, Dennis, you were taking a step that not many candidates take. I want to talk about it, of skipping the endorsement process, which, again, that is the road that you are typically told to go down, is go down the party endorsement process so that you can get elected by the delegates as being the endorsed candidate, and then go into the primary from a position of having the grassroots behind you. I'm curious about what kind of led to that decision, and we don't need to get too negative on the bit, but it's charting a new path, and I'm curious what led to that decision.
So back on June 1st, when I announced I was running, within a couple of days I had my first radio interview, first podcast in fact, and they asked me about, will I stop at the convention or will I go to the primary? And I laid out the case that we're 0 for 25 in statewide elections. It's been 56 years since we won the Attorney General's office. We've seen the destruction that Keith Ellison has brought to Minnesota. This race is too important. We need to win it back. And I said, I'm going to fight like heck for the endorsement. And I've traveled to 78 counties. I've been everywhere. I've gone to places that candidates have never gone to before in any prior race. In fact, one fun story, they baked me a pie for going there because they didn't believe I was coming.
Okay.
Said, you're going to have 30 of your people, and it was a long, one thing people don't realize how big our state is.
Yeah.
Once you start,
it is crazy.
Yeah, once you start driving around, you
Yes.
realize how big it is. But it was a long drive, many, many hours. But I went there and we had a great discussion. And they said, if you come, we'll bake you a pie. So, and sure enough, they went through and they baked us a pie. And so that was good to help get home.
Yeah.
So we've been traveling the state and wanted to go to the convention. And what we found is that the party insiders were fixing the election. And we've had some issues with not trusting election results in the last election or two. And it was happening again. So the party insiders were fixing the election. So I said, you know what? the race, as I've said the whole time, because I've answered that question on the record 4 or 5 other times it's been recorded, and in every town hall I get asked, that I said, I'm simply going to go straight to the primary and not stop at the convention, and I'm seeking the endorsement of the entire party this August. And July, the whole voting period.
Yeah.
Because the race is that important, and we're not going to let a few party insiders decide what happens. We're a big party. We need to broaden our horizons. In order for us to win as Republicans in this state, in this election and in the future, we need to do a better job of widening our tent. I'm starting that by going to the primary.
When you actually are campaigning, Dennis, what are you hearing from people on the ground? I think a lot of people like to speak kind of anecdotally about the general feeling of the state, and it seems like people are really angry. I'm just curious, what do you hear as you traveled 78 counties and you traveled the state of Minnesota? What are you hearing on the ground from everyday Minnesotans?
Yeah, they're angry about the crime, about not feeling safe. People in greater Minnesota are saying they're not driving to our great city anymore, and they're not going into St. Paul and Minneapolis, because they're taking matters into their own hands. In the suburbs, I hear people saying, "I'm not going into Minneapolis anymore," and we're seeing that result. You go to downtown Minneapolis, and it's like a ghost town. It's like a movie set half the time. So it's public safety. The other large item is that they've lost the trust in the election process. We've had too many errors where people just simply don't trust the results anymore. We need to get that back. That's critical to us moving forward. And as Attorney General, I'll help restore that trust. And then the third item is that the COVID laws and the mask mandates and the vaccine mandates were not implemented fairly. There's many cases I've heard anecdotally on the trail where businesses were pursued because of their affiliation, or that they were trying to draw a distinction between a big box retailer. They failed to do so, and the government came down unnecessarily hard on them on some laws that many would argue were not real to begin with. So they want fairness in the laws, and they don't feel like our current government is giving that to them. They will when I'm Attorney General.
You had mentioned the trust in elections, and I'm glad you did, because it seems like just from an issue set standpoint, it seems to be, I kind of wondered how quickly that issue might go away after the 2020 election. Just with everything that's transpired, it seems like Republicans are polling really well, this, that, and the other thing. It really does seem like people are genuinely concerned about the integrity of our elections. Just what, from the office of Attorney General, what can you even do about that?
Well, the first thing I would have done if I was the Attorney General during the 2020 election is when Steve Simon, our Secretary of State, circumvented the legislative process and made up a law on his own by using a cute legal trick. I would have brought that to court and let a panel of judges decide if that was the right thing or not for Minnesota, and not let one person change our election laws. That was the first thing. So that window was missed. But then every single allegation of voter fraud will be investigated when I'm Attorney General. And if you break the law, you break the election law, you will go to jail. When there's consequences for people's actions, then they'll change their behavior. Not until then. We see this all the time and time again, when with all the looting and burning we had in Minneapolis, or this advent of crime that we're seeing now on a daily basis, there's no consequences for the actions. So for this bad behavior, therefore it keeps repeating. So that will change when it comes to the election law violations.
And you brought up a good point, because in Minneapolis, I think that is a perfect example of discrimination, for lack of a better word, on how you actually prosecute people and how you send them to jail. I mean, personally, Dennis, and I'm not asking you to comment on it, but I was kind of frustrated when the Statue of Liberty, the Christopher Columbus statue got torn down, and the gentleman who did it in front of a camera, it seemed like he just kind of got a slap on the wrist. It seems like unequal treatment.
And there's been reports about that incident where the police were purposely kept around the corner and they were brought in after it happened, and that was orchestrated. And that goes to the distrust of the police department as well.
Right.
If you're there to serve and protect, then darn it, serve and protect us. And not just when it's convenient, or when your manager tells you that you need to do something because you're trying to get some sort of political point. Politics needs to come out of these agencies, and I will do that.
Yes, amen, amen. The trick you described with Steve Simon in the elections, it seemed like there were consent decrees, right, that happened between him and Keith Ellison, right? How does that work? What was that?
So he had a dummy organization bring forward a lawsuit on behalf of the state of Minnesota, which it wasn't.
Sure.
And then while that court process was unfolding, they negotiated a deal, which was all predetermined on the ahead of time. And then the judge agreed to it and said, okay, well, they've reached a deal. We're going to move forward. And so that was it in a nutshell. And therefore, we had changes in our election law that had an impact on the 2020 election. To what degree, we don't know, and we will never know. But what we can do is fight like heck for this next election. And that's what the Dennis Smith campaign is doing. That's what I'm doing. I'm making sure we win this next election so we have fair elections for this election, for the next one, and for the next generation.
So your next key date is that primary in August with some early voting. Dennis, what does the campaign trail look like for you? What are you doing on a daily basis?
Yeah, so we're having town halls. We're having meet and greets throughout the state. There's some fundraising. Oh, and our fundraising numbers. So fundraising numbers came out.
Those are kind of important, right?
They are kind of important, yes, yeah. And it's one of the differentiating factors of my campaign over everyone else's. We raised, so January 31st was the reporting date for last year. We raised more money than all of our competitors. We were tied with Keith Ellison. Tied.
This is the DNC darling, Keith Ellison, right?
20-year congressman, 3 years as a sitting attorney general. And the Dennis Smith campaign was tied, not only money raised, but cash on hand. That's the kind of appeal this campaign has in the grassroots throughout all of Minnesota and the country as well. Most of our money's coming from Minnesota, but there is enormous support for this campaign. And so there's a little bit of fundraising that happens as well. And then the meet and greets that I mentioned, the town halls, we're using technology and to connect with voters that's never been used before in a statewide race. So there's this relational software that we're using that goes on a daily basis, and talking to voters and connecting with voters. And it's incredible how refreshing they're receiving this campaign. We're talking to them in a straightforward fashion. We're accessible. We're having, we're meeting people out, and we're having a lot of fun doing it as well. We have all these fun promotions. We give away these great T-shirts. I call them the best T-shirts in politics. They're super soft. And if you want if you want a T-shirt, you get one for free. And then we post them on social media, and people have just a lot of fun with it. And sometimes they'll put it in put it on their dog or their animal. They pose with it, or they're doing some activity, and so we're campaigning in a way that's different. And people often say, Dennis, you're always smiling. Like, why are you always smiling? Like, it's really hard work campaigning. I'm like, it is, but I love doing this, and we're making a difference, and we're going to make a difference on election day when Keith Ellison gets voted out of politics.
Dennis, with the last minute, how can people get to know you a little bit better, learn more about the campaign, and what do you need?
Yeah, so follow our social media. Our website is dennissmith.org. I picked a complicated name, dennissmith.org.
Hard one.
Exactly, yep. And on there we have all of our events. We have information about me, but also we have places where you can meet face-to-face. And that's what I love more than anything. I'm often the last person to leave when there's an event because I love talking with people and connecting with them. So come to an event, learn about the campaign, follow us on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We're on some other platforms. So follow us and learn about the campaign there. If you want to be involved, if you want to help change the direction of this state and literally make history, then ask to get involved. And you can help with our technology, with our relational app. You can do phone calling and do a variety of other things like that. Always you can give financial contributions as well. But dennissmith.org is where it all starts.
Very good. Dennis Smith, thank you for joining the Republican Roundtable. Best of luck.
Thanks for having me.
This has been the Republican Roundtable. I'm your host, Max Reimer. Until next time.